Γεια σας, το Guitarspot σήμερα βρίσκεται στα στούντιο του Modern Music Arts και καλεσμένο μας έχουμε σήμερα τον Frank Gambale. Mr. Gambale, thank you for this interview. It's a great honor to have you here in Greece.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
What is the purpose of your visit here this time?
I'm doing a seminar here at the Modern Music Arts School and Studios, and Stylianos is, I've known him for a day now, and what a terrific fellow. You know, you need more people like him and yourselves doing really productive things in Greece. You know, I like people that say what they're going to do and then they do it. You know, and Stylianos strikes me as a really powerful guy, a really great guy.
What is the usual course that you do in those seminars and those clinics? What do you do? What do you teach?
Well, most often I just ask for the questions. And, you know, in my experience, wherever I go in the world, the questions are very similar. I always talk about sweeping and how I developed the technique. Because really the technique didn't exist before me. It's like throughout history there's certain points, people, certain figures that create something that is a focal point. You know, like Hendrix was the first guy to play loud and feedback and all that, and then you have people like Van Halen who did the tapping, created a whole style of playing that lots of people. Yeah, but before him, it's hard to imagine nowadays for kids. There was a time before tapping. There was, and I remember it well. There was a time before sweeping. Most people credit me for the development of the sweep picking technique, and and I wrote the first book on the subject and the video, and really developed it, took the idea to the moon.
Yeah.
So I usually talk a lot about sweeping in my clinics, and then questions, harmony, theory, life as a musician. There's lots of things and experiences that I can help inspire. My main aim is to inspire young guitar players, or any guitar player.
Okay.
Musicians.
What took you to develop this technique? I mean, if you have to go back and start thinking about the times that you were learning guitar and your influences and the stuff that you aimed for, what was the points that you built your blocks, that you developed your style day by day?
Well, I can really point it to two main things. The first 10 years of my playing, or so, you know, loosely, from what I can remember, was mostly listening to guitarists.
In what age
Right?
was that?
Well, I started when I was 6 or 7 years old. And mostly listening to guitarists, and I would transcribe and learn the solos, and after it was mostly blues also, and I really am thankful for a blues foundation. I think that that's a terrific foundation for guitar, expressive, learning the touch and all the subtleties and sounds that you can get from a guitar. And then I remember transitioning more to other instruments. One in particular was Chick Corea, when I discovered Chick Corea, the keyboardist, and Michael Brecker, the saxophonist. Those two guys they knocked my head off as a kid. I was just, when I was around 13 or so, I was so into the notes. I was more into the harmony and the notes then at that point. I was transitioning. I wanted to learn more about music. And, I'd gotten to the point where I could listen to a guitar player, and if they were playing a chord or something, I could hear with my ear what string they were playing on and which finger generally they were using. That's how detailed my ear became with the guitar.
Did you get a classical musical education?
No, I'm self-taught, pretty much.
Okay.
But then I got, when I started listening to other instruments, there was no preconception of where to play it on the instrument, on the guitar. If you're listening to a piano solo, really all you have is the information, the harmony, the notes, and same with the saxophone solo. And those instruments are so different to guitar physically, and so they can do things that are nearly impossible on the guitar, or very, very difficult. And my burning desire to play those lines, those chicoria lines or Michael Brecker lines on the guitar really pushed me towards this technique, the sweeping. And I had to find ways to reposition notes to accommodate this. It seemed logical, so logical. Sweeping is incredibly logical and incredibly efficient, which is just what you need when you have to play difficult lines from another instrument. So I really credit those guys in particular for launching me in that direction. And it made perfect sense, because if you have, say, four notes, one on each adjacent string, it doesn't make sense to go like this, an alternate. It makes no sense to me. It makes much more sense to go like that, one brush stroke. And so there was the logic. I went, okay, I can play 4 notes with a single stroke. That then, to me, is a quarter of the amount of work, a quarter of the effort required to play those 4 notes. So you could already understand the logic and the efficiency of that. And so it just developed. It turned into a monster. It just kept going. I kept finding new pathways, and it turned into a technique that's just, I'm thankful. It happened.
When did the realization of that came, though? When did you realize that you were onto something that is important, that is game-changing?
Right. Well, I didn't think about it too much until I moved to the USA. I signed up to go to GIT in Hollywood, the famous guitar school, in early 1980s, around 82. And, I've been playing in bands professionally since I was 13. So I was about 22 or 23 when I moved to the USA, to Los Angeles, to Hollywood. And
that was your first music school that you attended, the GIT?
Yeah. And
prior to that, you were completely self-taught by ear.
Well, there were a few clinics and seminars I went to with famous guitar players in Australia. Well, there was a guy called George Golla, who was like a Joe Pass, traditional jazz, and he was fantastic. I picked his brains for what scale do you play on this? How do you show me these voicings? What scale do you play? I tortured the guy because I was eager. I was about 15, and I just was full of questions. So he showed me a lot of stuff. I had pages and pages of notes. Everything he would say, I would write it down. And I remember he even did a sweep scale. He went down with sweep, 3 notes per string, down, up, down, every time it crossed. But he came back, alternate. And I went, why don't you go back the same way? And he said, well, it's hard. Can't do it. It feels more comfortable one way. And I went, that doesn't make any sense to me. Why wouldn't you be like a mirror? If you can go one way, certainly you can come back the other way, the opposite way. So I had these little indications of this technique all over the place, but nobody did anything with it really until I developed it. And so when I got to GIT, I was just being harassed in a nice way by all the students.
It was time to pay
students
your
were
dues.
going, they're going, how do you do that? Show me what you're doing. Wow. There was the wow factor. People going, they'd never seen anything
Even
like
the professionals?
it. Even the teachers, they were going, hang on a minute, what are you doing? They all just said, this is something very different. And so I got so bothered, I was trying to practice, and so many people were asking me about the technique. I decided to write the book. I wrote the book while I was still a student at GIT, and found, a publisher, and it went for. I said, here, don't bother me. Here's the book. Study it, and let me practice. And then I really had an indication, just from the reaction of everybody, that I was really onto something here.
Okay, and band-wise and music-wise, developing your own music and your own sound. When did you come to realize that you were there? What was your milestone in your music career? Your first important milestone that you knew, I'm here now. Okay.
Well, making my first album. And I remember the first time, even in those days, there were still radio stations that played new albums and new artists. And I remember being in drive time traffic, in a peak hour, rush hour traffic, sitting in traffic in Hollywood, and turning on the radio, and there was my song, one of my songs from my first album. And I'm going, hey, that's me, you know. That was an exciting moment. And
prior to that, did you do any session music for other musicians and bands and stuff like that?
Yes. Well, actually, I don't know exactly the chronology. I think the first album I recorded in LA was with the bass player Jeff Berlin. And I can directly draw a line from that to Chick Corea, because he recorded it. He hired Chick Corea's recording studio at the time called Mad Hatter. And we went into that studio, and I was in awe because there was all the album covers, the original artwork from the album covers.
How did it feel?
Awe. I was able to sit at the piano and go, man, this is where most of my favorite records were recorded. And then I remember it was a two-story building. The studio was upstairs, and that's where I ended up recording all the Electric Band records, actually. Below was Chick's office and management and all that, and I remember packing my gear into the car after one of the sessions on Jeff Berlin's record, and I saw a woman come out of the office. I didn't know who she was, but I just approached her and I said, look, here's my card. If Chick Corea ever needs a guitar player, you have to call me, you know. And she looked at my card, she went, Frank Gambale. My husband has talked about you. He's played with you. And I said, yeah, really? Who's your husband? Her husband was a fellow by the name of Tom Brechtlein. Tom Brechtlein is an incredible drummer. I don't know if you're familiar with who he is. He worked with Robin Ford for many years, Eric Johnson. He was with Chick for many years. In fact, when Chick came to Australia one of the first times, Tom Brechtlein was playing drums, and he was only 21 years old. Incredible drummer. And his wife is Chick's personal assistant. And so she said, yeah, okay. And 6 months after that, I got a call for an audition, so it's pretty magical.
Do you think that you have the opportunity to give your fans and people that grew up listening to your music the opportunity to live the dream the way you lived your dream, playing with all your idols?
Absolutely. It's a cycle, you know. Great band leaders always spot talent. They can see great young talent, and they will, when the opportunity arises, sure, they'll use young talent. Miles Davis did it. A lot of great people did it. Wayne Shorter, you know, even Joe Zawinul, a Weather Report, they found Jarko, you know. Jarko was on the street. He met Joe Zawinul. He went up to Joe Zawinul and he says, I'm the best bass player in the world. You need to use me in your band. That's some balls, if you ask me, you know. And Zawinul was so taken back by this guy that he gave him a try, and it was, you know, history making. Chick used in the Electric Band, you know, different to the Return to Forever group, which was Chick Corea's peers. They were the same age, you know, Lanny White, Stanley. They were maybe a year or two different, but with the Electric Band, his concept was to get young players. So he got Wackel and Patitucci and myself and Eric Marenthal, young players, young good players, and he assembled a mighty group, you know. He's doing that again now. He's got a new group with the Vigil. And so I like to do that too also whenever I have the opportunity. In fact, this group I'm touring with right now is all musicians from Chile. Now, I'm giving them an opportunity.
How did it came about?
Well, I was touring. Sometimes I tour by myself. I'll go down to a country and do a tour and play with local musicians. You know, that happens. You know.
You give them music seats and you go
Yes.
there and you do
Yeah,
check.
they come recommended to me. There's a bass player. This guy from Chile is crazy good. His name is Christian Galvez, and he's extraordinary. Amazing. That's all I can say about him. And I played with his trio, his keyboard player, a young guy, Oscar Pizarro, and Ronald Bays is the young drummer, and they're fabulous musicians. And they've all been big fans of mine too, so it's, you know, it's exactly what you're asking, which is...
From the new age of guitarists, have you found someone that is close to the heart and you like what they're doing, remind you of yourself perhaps in the early days?
Yeah, there's quite a number of players around. I had a student that came through very young, that's doing some great stuff. He's kind of gone more pop now, but Brian Baker is one kid that's got some amazing talent. There was a guy in Scotland who now lives in Italy. MacDonald is his last name. I think it's Ben MacDonald, and very, very good young players. There's a guy, Alex Hutchings,
he's a very known clinician for...
Yeah, great player, man. Fantastic musician. There's many, you know.
You were sort of some kind of pioneer back in the days, in the 80s, with all the VHS
Yes.
tapes with the techniques and the backing tracks and all the theatrics and stuff like that. But nowadays it's the internet era. You can almost find everything you want in the internet, the tabs,
for free.
Yeah, for free.
Sadly.
Well, how does that affect the music and the business and the music, like an art, in your opinion?
Well, that's a complex question. I'm currently developing an online school, and I'm actively shooting a lot of video. I've just finished 10.5-hour course of blues, right from the beginning to, you know, blues god, you know, and everything in between, because you know, and I think the internet is the perfect place, you know, for instruction. Universities are doing it right now. Everybody's got an online presence because that's where it's all going, right?
Is it better?
Well, the accessibility and the distribution is definitely better. I mean, you could be sitting in Malmo, Sweden, in the middle of winter with 1 hour of sun. What are you going to do? You can access a website and learn blues guitar. I just did a new video course for a new sweep picking course, which brings forward, because I haven't done anything since the 80s, so all this, the last 25 years of development, I've found a whole lot of new stuff that is explained in this video course also. I'm going to build it up. I have tons that I want to do in video, kind of as a legacy project also. I want to leave it for future generations if they're still interested in playing guitar in the future.
Do you think there would be?
I hope so. There's, you know, you can cut and paste music all day, but there's nothing like it's like the difference between a photograph and being there sometimes, you know what I mean? You can explain the Grand Canyon all you want, but until you see it with your eyes, you know the difference. You know what I mean by that, right? I still think a string plucked and a great artist, a great performer, someone who's spent their entire life playing an instrument, watching that live will never be lost, I hope, as an art form. I mean, I know people are going out and seeing these rave shows where there's one DJ and a big light show and there's 5,000 people watching, and I go, why? I don't understand. What are you actually watching? You know, there's always that mentality too. But I think, you know, art, music arts and performing and instruments, I hope they live on forever because they're very pure, they're very natural. Anyway, but you know, the internet has changed a lot of things. You know, I could go on and on about the piracy thing, which is not really helping anybody. A lot of musicians are really struggling at the moment. A lot of musicians, because everything's being, you know, through the peer-to-peer stuff, people downloading stuff for free, and you know.
But they also use it as a marketing tool as well. People with no presence at all can use this free sharing of the music so they can build a presence. It's a
That's the
double-edged sword.
theory. That's the theory. That's all well and good, but it's also that's if you can build a market for yourself. When you have products, when you spend and invest money in making a recording and writing the music, the time it takes, and then you're always paying the studio, you pay the musicians, you pay the mastering lab, you pay the artist to create the cover, blah blah blah. Everybody gets paid, and then you put music out, and you sell one, and 100 are copied. It's like the business model has changed very much because the money is not returning to the artists.
Do you think that will ever change? Will people realize that this is wrong and unfair, and perhaps stop it?
No, I don't know. You're talking morals here, which is questionable for. I don't know. That's my honest answer, but it doesn't seem likely. So then we have to really try to understand how we can use this new paradigm to make a living and have some kind of income, because musicians and artists need an income. They have families, they have mortgages, just like everybody else.
Let's talk about guitars now. In your long career, you have used a lot of guitars, I gather.
Yeah.
So, can you name a few, the most important for you, and the ones that you're currently using?
Well, they're our tools, really. I mean, and for different needs. It's like a carpenter with a hammer and a screwdriver. They're two incredibly valuable tools, completely different. And I try as best as I can, especially when I was creating some of the models with some of these great companies. I was with Ibanez and then Yamaha, and now with Carvin. I try to make an instrument. It's great to be on the creative end of instruments, to help design the instruments. I try to make a workhorse instrument. By that I mean something that is that has lots of capability for different sounds, but you can't make one instrument do everything, but you can make one instrument do a lot of things. Lately I'm into the more of a hollow body sound, and I've always liked that because it's a warmer tone and it feeds back a little sooner, so you get a little more sustain. Sometimes it's a wild beast, trying to keep it under control, but this is a chambered instrument, although you can't,
I see, yeah.
The Ibanez that I was helping with, the Sabre, which became a very, very popular instrument, that guitar was incredibly thin. I didn't design the body, and that guitar was presented to me. What I helped do was refine the instrument, and that became an incredibly popular instrument all over the world. So anyway, there's lots of guitars. I've had, classics. My first real great guitar was presented to me by my family when I was 13. It was a Fender Strat. It was like Hendrix's guitar. It was a white Strat. Beautiful. L-Series Strat, 64. And we got it used. It was...
Do you have one guitar that stands out for sentimental reasons, not for technical reasons per se, that stands out from all the collection? The desert island guitar that we say usually.
Yeah, well, I would try and get a few on board if I was stuck on a desert island. No, I'm not particularly. I don't have one particular instrument. I have this really cool Gibson that I like right now. It's from the mid-'60s, and I probably played it with that concert that you saw with Alain and Omar. Was the it's a Gibson. Was it the weird-looking Gibson?
Yeah.
It's a Trini Lopez model. It's big arch top, double cutaway. Very crazy guitar. It's got an inline like a Fender headstock with 6 in a row, and it has a quirky instrument. Very strange, but beautiful. I have it in a place in my house where when I walk into my studio, it's the first thing I see.
Okay. Amp-wise and pedals and stone boxes and stuff like that?
I'm not a big stomp box fan. To me, it's like a little big sound. Because they're only little. I mean, they're a little sound. I can never. A lot of people love them and use them all the time. Maybe I need to explore a few more of them. But I've always preferred the rack devices.
It's more digital, I would say.
Yeah, but a lot more variety and a lot higher quality. And I've always leaned towards Marshall amps. You know, I always liked the natural coloring of Marshalls with Celestians. And I've been developing a new amp with DV Mark. It's a company out of Italy that's doing really well right now. We have a new product coming very soon, which is a digital, it's called a multi-amp FG, my version of their multi-amp amp, which is, I love having it all in one place. This has effects, you know, modeling, and power amp all in one device.
It's very practical for touring and traveling and stuff
absolutely,
like that.
Absolutely, and that's becoming a popular item, I think, and that will be released at the next NAMM show in LA.
Okay, so we discussed about the online courses. What's the plans apart from that? The musical plans, new album, new tour, new collaborations.
You know, after doing this blues course, I'm quite into doing a blues album. I haven't done it yet. It's formulating in my head. I would like to do a nice blues record because that's kind of returning to my roots a little bit. I'm not well known as a blues guitar player, but I have blues roots. And one of the things that inspired this course was I was in England doing an interview several years ago, and there's a magazine called Guitar Techniques.
Yeah.
And it's a great magazine. They put a little DVD in the front. And right at the end of the interview, they said, hey, we have this little blues backing track. Would you mind playing a few choruses? And we'll transcribe it. And you've seen that. Yeah. Well, that thing went, you know...
With a photo body you were, I think.
That's right, an orange thing. And that, when that finally came out, it sort of, for my numbers, it went kind of viral on the internet, on YouTube.
Yeah, because it's a different approach from the classical box shape and stuff like that.
That's exactly right, and that's exactly what this entire course is about that's coming. It's called Spicing Up the Blues, because everybody wanted my take on the blues, you know. That's what people went berserk. They said, where can I get this? So it inspired me to do an entire 10.5-hour course of step-by-step showing people how to get more creative inside a blues context. And it's a very cool concept for a course. So I was very inspired by the reaction.
Do you think that you're going to do original blues songs or perhaps covers of
Yeah, that's a good
classic
question. I haven't decided yet, but I may just do covers.
That would be an excellent...
I would like to maybe just do all covers for this particular blues album, because there's a lot of my favorite blues songs that I would like to do. A lot of them are John Mayall. I love John Mayall's take on the blues. So I'll probably cover mostly his, or choices that he made.
Perhaps some tour afterwards.
Maybe. Okay. And I plan to do another Soul Mine record with my wife. We're about halfway through some pre-production on some new songs. Yeah, I'm back into vocal music at the moment. I mean, I've always, when I was in Australia growing up, all the groups that I was in were always vocal groups, not instrumental music. And I was always in with vocal harmonies, singing either lead or one of the harmony parts. And I honestly must say I've missed that all these years. I've let it just sit. So now that, I don't know if you heard Soul Mine, it came out a couple of years ago with my wife, and it got a terrific response. And so we're going to follow that up with a second album soon. Okay. So that and the blues record, that's the next horizon.
Mr. Gambale, thank you very much for the time you took to give us this interview. It was an honor having you here.
Thank you.
We wish you the best in your career, and we hope to see you again soon in a tour or in a clinic in the near future.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Για περισσότερες συνεντεύξεις, παρουσιάσεις μουσικού εξοπλισμού και online μαθήματα κιθάρας, επισκεφτείτε το Guitarspot.Gr.